just you get to choose. Right? Like here's the scenario. The environment gives us something which can be perceived as negative, can be perceived as not working, can be perceived as problematic. The world's ending. So we get to choose to see it like that, or we get to choose to see it as an opportunity.
So clearly that it's my responsibility now to do that for other people. If I have information and, other people's success is my success and vice versa.
Because you know what? Like, the challenges or the roadblocks are the journey themselves.
There's no big things. It's all little things compounding on top of each other. How are you? I'm great. Hope you are. Have a nice day. So much of our lives are played on the surface. What does it mean to be deeply immersed in something? To get every last drop of value from a success principle, a conversation, a practice, or even a way of life? In today's special edition of Truth Seekers Coach's Corner, Coach Nick and I discussed the analogy of a flashlight. There are two options on the flashlight. The first being a floodlight option that encompasses the broad landscape of our vision. And then there's a more focused, what we might call immersive option that we can use anytime that hones in on one particular thing. Where our attention goes, our energy follows. When we talk about immersive experiences, why are they so effective? What happens when you take something to another level beyond what you thought was possible, doable, or necessary? And what are the benefits from being truly committed to one thing? All this and much, much more on this special edition of Truth Seekers Coach's Corner with Coach Nick Davies. We are back with another episode of Truth Seekers Coach's Corner with Coach Nick Davies. What's up, Coach?
Extra special Coach's Corner.
Extra special today. We're speaking truth. We're speaking success principles and simple secrets. You got any simple secrets of success that you can share today? What's on your mind?
What's on my mind right now is the simple secret of immersion, getting deep on something in order to create a level of experience, a level of skill, a level of association, which allows you to keep it, which keeps resonance for longer, enough so you can hit spaced repetition.
So going deeper, immersion of a principle, of a goal. Like what part of the immersion? Where are we going?
Yeah, anything. Principles of getting good at anything. It's on my mind right now because of what we're doing this week as a coaching team here. We're going to do leadership experience, bring all the coaches down. All the newer coaches get experience for the first time, or the seasoned coaches get to dig deeper for themselves, for them. Immersion is a way of kickstarting things. If you were to decide that you were going to go learn tennis, if you did 1 hour of tennis sessions a week, you'd slowly get better. If you did one a week, and you were consistent, you'd get better. But if you did a tennis camp for a week, where you played 3 hours of tennis a day for a week, 15 hours, maybe 2 weeks, 30 hours of tennis. And then you start doing once a week. Do you think that you would get better quicker? So if you did 30 hours over 2 weeks, so you could do, if you did an hour a week, let's say that's 50 hours a year, or if you did 30 hours over 2 weeks, and then you did that, then did once a week, what would you think that you'd be better after that whole year of a week, or do you think you'd be better after that 2 weeks?
Probably where I immerse myself more deeply for longer periods of time. But I have some thoughts of that. But go ahead. I feel like you're drawing a line with something, so keep going.
Time is not always equal. Just like if you some things that we do, you can look at your calendar and go, well, actual time I'm working today is only 4 hours. But it might be over a 9 hour span, and everything in between is 15 minutes here, 30 minutes there, 45 minutes there. Those times essentially are wasted if you intended on using them as thinking time or focus time or creative time. If they're to fit in activities that you predefine, which are smaller items, fine, but you're not going to use them for anything that's going to make a difference in terms of depth. You were to say, I've got 4 hours of work and they just go for the first 4 hours and now I've got 5 hours the rest of the day where it's free to go deep on something. Same amount of time, but using it effectively is different. So if you say I'm spending 30 hours of tennis, then the level that you get to is essentially the same as going on a journey to the top of that mountain quicker because I can see what's there next. So we love metaphors, analogies. Here it is. So we talk about going on the journey, form, storm, norm, perform. You're going to go down the mountain to go into the valley, to get into the storm, to go up the other side of the mountain, to finally get to the peak that you can see. And at that point, it's all worth the journey. And then from that point, we can celebrate. And then you can see the next peak that you couldn't see when you first started. But what if you could take a quick helicopter ride from that first peak to the peak that you can see? And then from there, you can get an actual view of what's available for that next level. And then that helicopter might drop you back off at that first peak again. So now you're starting the journey from where you are to really get the value from it, but you already know what might be available at that top level. I think an immersive experience is kind of a way of showing, even if it's just a quick view into what might be possible with that next level up.
A helicopter ride.
Let's go on a helicopter ride of immersion.
Yeah, I listened to a podcast recently that talks about attention. And they use the analogy of a flashlight. So you have a flashlight or a floodlight that includes a bigger area, but it's not as focused, right? You can't really, you're noticing everything, or you're more alert to what could happen as a possibility. Whereas if you have a single beam of flashlight and the room is dark, your attention is going wherever that beam is. And you're maybe more capable of doing things or seeing things more clearly if you have that single beam, which is what I would, liken your immersion analogy to. So immersion in that example would be the single beam flashlight, so that when you get really deep, there's more. So in your tennis example, right, a half hour for a full year, maybe it takes me that third week to get my forehand down, whereas 3 hours of working on my forehand, maybe by hour 2.5, I get to that same thing. And then who knows what happens after that? It's like such an exponential leap, because once I have that down, then I can put spin on it and, backspin and lobs and so to your point, you get to where you're going more quickly. But this is what I think about. Like, you also give up other things, don't you? You can't do, I don't want to diverge too much, but I also listened to a video recently that talks, Conor McGregor, right? UFC mixed martial artist, talks about how he's been working on his craft. And there's a Van Gogh quote that talks about how he's given up everything to master his craft. And in that process, he's lost touch, or people think that he's losing his mind. And he says, on the contrary, I feel like I found it. I found it more than ever, because I'm so focused on it. I'm getting incredible results with this thing. Look at what it's given me, aka him, with fame and fortune, and he's on top of the sport for quite a long time. So it works. Like, there's examples everywhere that it works. But how can we make sense of that? Like, as business people, or like, so much is demanded of us, right? To be able to have that. I don't want to have that FOMO of other things that I could be doing or bringing alongside of me at the same time, when I might have to give up those things to do this deep work immersion.
I love it. We're back to intention and commitment again, I believe. I can't see it any other way that if you define something as the most important and you go all in on it, you do everything that you can, your life is focused on it. Yes, you could get obsessed with it. You get obsessed with something. That's the way that you could get the most impact in that particular area. How can it be any other way, right? If you put 100% of yourself into something, that's the chance that you've got of getting the best version of that based on whatever those parameters are set out as. But what does that mean, right? Just as the extremes of everything, if I don't do any of it, I get none of it. If I do all of it, I get all of it. But based on the extremes, there's going to be some trade-offs. So I think that's a really good conversation to have anything in your life. Doing a yearly review with one of our clients recently, apt time in his second week in January. We were doing this back in December, looking at the things that he set out, and he did extraordinarily well, nailed it in his job, best year ever, most money ever, hit some other parameters where he's giving back. I don't want to give any details, giving back. And the fourth thing was he didn't hit his health goals. And I thought that was really fascinating because he was like, oh man, I didn't hit my health goals. So, well, it wasn't in the things that were most important to you. It was fourth on the list. So it's not that he did wrong or he couldn't. It's just he can't do everything. The things that he focused on, he got results in. What you focused on is what you get. And if he'd been even more singular in focus, then he could have got even bigger results in that singular area. So it just comes down to, this is semantics, but this is what I think about it. Decision is in or out. It's binary. Or at least it should be. I think commitment, you can think about commitment on a scale. I think it's just helpful to think of it like that. Are you committed to something? Yes, meaning it's important. I'm in, when I do it, I'm into it. But then at what level? 1 through 10, let's say. If it's something is a high commitment level, then you know that it means that you won't let go of it. Let's say a 10 out of 10 commitment is something that you are going to do or you're going to die trying. That's a level 10 commitment. And then, so what's the other thing? The other thing is priority. Now, we know we can only have one priority, but you might find this is your priority, and then this is the sequential hierarchy of the other things after that. So once you realize that anything's possible, it's just a question of that commitment and priority. How committed am I, 1 to 10? And where does it go on the hierarchy of things that are important to me right now? So it's the commitment and the time.
Yeah, hierarchy really speaks to me because that's what life is. Why do we take any action, whether we think about it or not? This is kind of what the mind scan's about, right? What do we value in our thinking? And when we're really intentional about those questions, which is why it's so great to be a coach, because we get to bring the most important things front and center. Because people know what those things are, but they're not always asked them. That's why when you ask people what they want, they usually can't answer it, right? Like how many times have we covered that? So it's holding the standard though, right? The more you press in on that, eventually they're going to come up with the answer. And I say come up with it I chose those words carefully because it's not they're going to like find it. It's already there. So they're going to come up with it. It's just about defining what it is for them. And the more you ask, the more you get them thinking about it. And it's almost like the bottom of a forest floor. You just got to like clear all the leaves away. Like it's there. The path is there. But just asking the questions and leading them to that place can be so powerful. And then there's many paths on the forest floor, right? So that hierarchy is like, well, we do have to pick and choose. We do have to be decisive. And maybe that's the reason why people aren't as decisive as they could be or committed as they could be, is because there are all these paths. And the pick one can be a challenging thing. But to your point, like I love that mantra, like it's binary. Like once you're in, you're committed to this because it's either 100% or it's not, or it's 0%. There's no higher, or there's no scale with that. So maybe that commitment eliminates the hierarchy. Like my hierarchy is one thing. And I'm in for it. I'm doing that thing. And I think the beauty of it is it can change. So maybe that the client that you shared there, maybe health goes up to number 2 or number 1 this year. And that's like his most important thing. And I think that's the fun part because what he accumulated in his business or the other top 3 things, you can assign systems. You can kind of, you have a flow there already. You've already primed the pump and you can put some of those things to the back burner without losing as much as, I didn't hit my health goals this year.
That's exactly what we got. And then testing it as well. Because everything flows through. Am I committed to this or not? That's the decision part. Binary, yes, I am. Okay, now it hits on the decision. That first part is so important because otherwise everything gets in. And we cannot add a commitment or a priority level for everything. You have to go, am I in or not? In gets a commitment level, gets a priority level, gets onto the execution list, if you will. Because if we let everything in, you spend all your time prioritizing and commitment scaling. Got to know. And then once you decide what is your 1, 2, 3 things max, then you get to test. And this is the key part. This part of our AAA approach. The achievement part is part of testing. It's the continuous experiment of what am I actually doing? So here's what I say is important. Where do I live operationally? So that example, what's that?
Is it matching? Is it in alignment?
Right, exactly. Are you doing what you said you were going to do? Like that client example was, hey, so if you're saying, and he said, my health is the most important thing for Q1, my health is the most important thing. So that would look like operationally that if there's a requirement for you to take that extra meeting at work or to take a late call or to work on one of these other projects that's late in night, you're going to say no, because I'm already committed to waking up early for my workout tomorrow. That's the operational version of that.
Yep.
In action, right? Like, and that's the difference between saying I am and the overlay of doing, because that's where the results come from. Right? It's like if you say one thing and results say something different, you know that there's a disconnect. You're not doing what you said.
Right. Well, I would think, and that's where it gets fun, right? Because I would think the first couple of months of this year might be challenging for that client, right? To change his hierarchy or his structure might be a bit uncomfortable, right? It's going to be something new. So whereas he always took that call at 9 o'clock at night, and that's why he didn't make his workout. If workouts are all of a sudden important, man, it's going to feel like he's betraying something, or like something's going to feel off to them. That's why coaching's so important, right? Because there's navigating that is super important, and there is a way to navigate it, and it's usually not the terrible thing that we've made up in our mind that we have to give up in order to get that. We can have it all. We can have it all.
Absolutely. And back to the immersion and then the oscillation of those things, because you talked about systems. If you're success in business 1 year and now something else is important, doesn't mean that thing has to suffer. But you also know you cannot make the same impact again without the same immersion again. So in its rawest sense, the immersion, so for example, for this week, we'll go down and do the coach's immersion. All the stuff we'll do there will be super valuable, but it will be in it, living in it, defining things to take away, things to put into practice, setting out outcomes. If you spend all your time in it, what would happen? You wouldn't get anything done because you've been spending all the time in it. So there's a point of diminishing returns there, of course, as well. You're always in the immersion of the learning. You can't do any of it. But if you're always doing it, you can't get to the place of immersion and creativity. So if you go all the way in for that 2 weeks of tennis, you come out again, great. You can start using it. But in that sense, it's really interesting, right? Because unless the using it is what you do every day, you won't. And what happens if you don't use something? You lose it, right? You'll do 30 hours of tennis over 2 weeks, feel really great about the progress you made. If you don't play tennis again for 3 months, you're going to be back to square one. But and here's the cool part, you've only got to play once a week for an hour, let's say, to keep that level and keep it moving up. Because you're building on that place every week. It's that laying that extra stone and extra brick every week. And so that spaced repetition after the immersion doesn't have to be as much, because it's almost like the same thing as once the plane is flying, it doesn't need nearly as much to keep it in the air as it did to take off.
I love that analogy. So that'll be my takeaway today. I'm going to steal that from you. Thank you very much. But I think that's so important, right? Because that's what I'm talking about with that FOMO of like, oh my gosh, I'm giving up on everything else. But it's not really. It's like I'm immersing myself to get that off the ground. Once it's off the ground, I don't have to immerse myself in that anymore. I can go immerse myself in something else. So that's key. And I might just finish with this. So challenge whoever's watching this or listening to this. What are you in for? Think about that. Like, what's at the top of your hierarchy? And if we, experience yields what we think it does, maybe you don't know that answer right away. Keep asking yourself that. What are you in for? What are you definitely committed to? And if it's not something that you can answer right away, find it, because you'll get it. Just define it for yourself. What's at the top of that hierarchy?
You can walk away and in the space between the asking the question again and again and again, it could be 5 minutes, could be a few hours, could be a few days, could be a few weeks. Notice that it's kind of like no man's land. It's limbo. If you haven't got a defined commitment to something, you won't have defined action and then defined results. No progress, no happiness. Until you define it, you won't find it, because you've got to define it, take the action, then find it. You can't find it first, then do the work. It's so counterintuitive from the outside, isn't it?
Until you define it, you won't find it. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Is that an original, Coach, or did you steal that?
It might be. It might be.
All right. I'll give you the last word. Any other takeaways, recommendations for people watching this?
That part of getting it off the ground is really important, because I've been in this place in my life before where I thought, I don't want to do this, because if I take it on, that's a big commitment. I want the results. It sounds good to me, but man, that's a lot of responsibility. If I take that on, I've got it. I can't get rid of it. Even if there are a lot of results, it's a big thing. So that part is really important, that once you do something that's a stretch for you in that moment and you do it again and again, it no longer is a stretch. It becomes who you are. And it so no longer feels like that depth of that stretch of like, oh my goodness, I can't keep that up. It becomes you. That's why we got to continue moving, because we adapt. We're so good at adaptation.
Love that. Coach, thank you for joining us on another episode of Truth Seekers. We will see you next time.
Thank you for watching another episode of Truth Seekers. We appreciate your interaction. So please comment, like, subscribe to YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want more, check out some of our links. Links to our masterclass, The Achiever's Mindset. Come join our LinkedIn group. And what do you want to see more of? Remember, we're here to share the simple secrets of successful. So help us do that. What do you want to see? What do you want to see more of? Thanks, and see you again next time.